So far what we've done is we talked about colors, right? Now, if I look at my file here, you know, I may, like, for example, like, let's say I have the status update piece of text, right? I may do some more customization. Like, you guys may say, oh, I want the padding to be, I don't know, 20 dp, right? Something like that, to give it a little more space. Or not 20, but maybe 15, right? You may say like certain things like that, okay? Now, if you have, that's okay if you have a single screen. But what if you have now 4 or 5 screens and you want to have a consistent title across all the screens, all the activities? How do you do that? Right? Because if you look at this now, look how many properties I kind of set up on this particular. By the way, you can Control Shift F to reformat it. So I set up a lot of properties on this tiny little piece of text. So if you have 15 screens, I would have to copy paste it everywhere. Right? Also, if I have 15 screens, you know, I want to make a change in one place, I would have to go and make change in all the other 14 places, right? So that's a drag. Doesn't work very well, right? How do you manage this on a web? I mean, isn't this an old problem? Yes. Yeah, you have your style sheets, right? You put it in a CSS. So you can actually do exactly the same thing in Android. So there's something called a style, right? So a style is a resource. It works exactly the same way as everything else. So for example, I could click on resource. I could say file, new Android XML file. I could say, you know, I'm going to create my style. I don't know, my style, right? And I would say it's a no, it should be a value. Yeah, it should be a value. So it goes into the values folder, right? So it's a values and then my style. Right? Got it? So click on finish, and so now yet another screen that looks exactly like our, you know, our strings and our colors, right? It's just another XML file with a bunch of resources inside of it. So you could add a resource called style/theme, right? Sometimes they're called styles, sometimes they're called themes. Usually, if you apply a style to a widget, to a view, it becomes it's referred to as a style. If you apply it to an entire activity or an entire application, it becomes a theme, right? So theme is just a bigger style, right? So you can give it a name, and you can optionally inherit from a parent. In other words, you can do the cascading styles, right? That's what cascading is, right? You inherit from a parent. So you may have basic style for, you know, screens 1 through 10, styles for admin screens, blah blah blah, right? So they could inherit from one another, just like in CSS, right? So I'll give it a name, you know, my style, for example, and no parent. Save. Now, what you would do is you would now copy certain things, or let's say, as opposed to my style, I'll call, yeah, that's, this is going to be title style for title style. There's going to be my title style, like for the title of the app, right? So what you can do now is you can add items to this style, okay? And items are now name value pairs that specify the value for that, right? So it's kind of that's what it is, right? So for example, if I had in my status, I had, let's see which one, padding, right? So it's actually, and it's kind of confusing. The name is going to be the right side of this, so it's going to be padding. and the value is going to be yeah, so it's going to be like that. So if I want to outsource it to this file, I could say padding 15 dp, right? You can do other things. I can add another item. For example, we had gravity. There's another item. So I would say gravity center. Okay. Make sense? So now, and you save it. I shouldn't be saying this anymore, but saving is important, right? You gotta save everything. So this resource now has a style. It could actually have multiple styles. You could have a style for title, style for buttons, etc., right? You can go crazy with this stuff. So now back to this guy, as opposed to referring, hard coding all these values like gravity and padding, right? I could remove that, and instead of that, I could basically say style is at style / title. Right, so for my title, I actually apply, oh, sorry, slash, yeah. Sorry, / title star. Let me see something. No, it's complaining here. Yeah, that's confusing. Okay, I believe that's how it's right. But the name of my title is title style, right? So back here, so it's that / style, so it's title _ style, right? Or if you don't like typing like this, right? If you prefer the graphical layout, you could just select your title, and then you could go. Actually, can you right-click here? This is new. You can right-click and you can say other properties, recent or defined by text view or by name. So you can find it either this way, or you can just find it here, whichever way works for you, right? There's like there are about 3 ways to do it. So you could click on style here, click on ... and pick title style. Yeah. Oh, apparent. I think it's just a bug with Eclipse. So you can do source format, and that seems to get rid of it. Yeah. Okay, let me take a look. So try, if you still have the text, it seems that this helps, putting Android column, right? Okay, so try that. So yes, the best practice would be to move all this stuff, or almost all this stuff, like layout, width, gravity. I mean, everything that is sort of that is a common across all titles, you should cut out of here, like width, height, gravity, text, the text appearance. Well, text is actually unique, right, to each one, presumably, right? So now the text size, padding, all those cosmetic things should go into a style. Make sense? So that your next title looks exactly the same because you're applying the same style. So that would be the best practice. It's just that you have to do some a little bit of stuff with it. So I could cut it out of this, and then my style. You have to kind of wrap it and stuff, so it's a little bit of a work, right? and so on. That would be sort of extracting almost everything, right, from that guy to here. I wouldn't extract ID and I wouldn't extract title style, right? And one thing that I wouldn't extract is the text, the actual text, right? Because that's going to be, oops, that's important, right? So far, so good.
I'm in the properties editor and try to add that style from there.
Okay, let's see a better way of doing the same thing. This is kind of like a lot of work, right? And lots of work leads to lots of typos. There's actually a way to do this via saying extract style. So for example, I selected a button, right? I right click and I say extract style. And you give it a name. What did it call the previous style? It was a style title or title style? Title style. Okay, so button style. But it's not selecting. What's that? No, it's supposed to extract that in a style. It doesn't seem to work always. That's why I kind of tell you that afterwards.
You do the text window has a couple things.
So if I do it here and I say extract style, this one does notice that, right? Yeah. So if I say edit text style, right? So this is now gonna create a new style, extract it, and possibly put it into my styles. No, actually it created a new file called styles XML. I guess that's the default, but that's what my style is. It extracted those things, right? So this was done automatically, right? And it's great when it works. Then you do what you just did previously manually, right? At the end of the day, it's just it's a piece of text. So it extracts certain things. It doesn't extract others. So it doesn't seem to want to extract the width, height, weight, ID, and hint. That makes sense why it's not, but I'm not sure why these don't get extracted. I would imagine they would have. Right? So. Yeah, there would be nothing to extract. Yeah, that's fine. So that's a neat little feature of Eclipse to help you with that. So, go ahead.
Why is it on some of them you have to remove the word Android? Because my style thing, it worked when I removed Android.
Yeah, so you don't say for style, you don't say Android column style. Is that what you're referring to?
Right.
Yeah, style is different. I don't know why, but it doesn't have that namespace. Almost everything else that I could think of does have that namespace. Okay, so now that I told you about how you can create your own styles by simply extracting them, let's take a look at some of the system styles. So just like you have your own styles, system ships with a whole bunch of styles. So for example, you know, if I look at my styles activity, like wouldn't it be cool if I was able to just do something like this, apply a theme to, like, for example, make it look different. I like to look to make it look like light. See how this like changes the look and feel of your app. Yeah, themes. So I'm using this tank here. Themes. Right? So I can basically just say, you know, let's change it to theme toast. I mean, there's some things don't make sense, right? But usually the theme that I use, especially when I use a projector, is a theme.light, because it changes the, it basically becomes white text on black, so black text on white background, which tends to be easier on projector. Right? So that's what I typically do. Now, just changing it here doesn't do anything. This is not going to accomplish anything. It's nice that you change it and you can see how it's going to look differently, but when you run it, nothing happens, right? So, where do you specify a theme? Well, just like a style is something that you apply to the entire, to a widget, theme is something you would apply to an activity or a entire app. So as such, you could actually go into the manifest file and apply there, right? So what I can go is, I open up a manifest file, right? And in the manifest file, I'm going to go into applications. And then there's something called theme. So far, so good. So you could go ahead and create your own theme, or you can actually refer to one of the system themes. So just like we have our own strings and robots and other resources and styles and etc., system ships with its own stuff. So if you want to refer to a system-wide theme, something that's built in, already came with Android, you say Android style / theme.light. So now I applied this theme.light from Android's built-in style to the entire app. So my entire app is going to look a specific way. Right?
You apply one theme at the whole application level, but then you apply individual styles, so you can go over these override.
Yes, so you can cascades down. So you can basically apply it to the app level, and it's going to cascade down just like a cascading style sheets. Right? So the property that's closest to the actual drawing, right? So the property that's on the widget itself always takes precedence. Right? So this is now a theme that's applied to everything, right? There's a new, don't quote me exactly, but I believe since ice cream sandwich, you're supposed to you must respond to theme.hollow.light and theme.hollow, which is basically the bluish kind of theme, right? So your app can have other themes, but it must also support that theme. Something of that nature, because they're kind of trying to standardize a little bit in the look and feel, so they're imposing some rules there, right? So themes are good. So this is the easiest way you just apply to the whole thing. Now the question is, where is this theme? Where is this Android stuff? You know, we know where our strings are, where our themes are. They're under RES folder in our project, but where's the system stuff? Yeah, so one of the directories that you have in your SDK, let me see if I have it open. Remember our SDK? One of the directories you have is this directory called data. And inside of that directory, you have another directory called res. So I'm basically in SDK /platform /pick-your-platform /data /res. Right? Stands for resources. Okay. So this is the stuff that the system ships with. You guys were asking about, colors. Do you have to remember colors and stuff? Well, not really. I mean, these are some colors there, that already pre-configured, right? Primary text, dark, disable only, blah, blah, right? So this is some color selector, right? And so on and so on. You were asking about, let's see, the actual color values. Under values, colors, So these are the system colors that are defined, right? So color, white, black, transparent, background dark, dim, background light, blah, 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 right? So these are the colors that are already pre-configured. So if you want to refer to them, you would say at Android column color / transparent, for example. Make sense? Android also ships with a whole bunch of images, right? So if you, for example, want to see some of the images, you can /data /res. So these are system images. These are things that ship with Android in terms of the actual things that you can find in there, right? There's just a small subset. That was land. Let me see high density. So, so these are some standard images you may be familiar with. Right? These are my favorite. Right? So you get the idea. That's where the images are like. Questions? So I'm gonna leave my theme.light there. I'm gonna run it and see what happens. Ooh, I have a project there. Alright, so check the console. So project clean, figure out what's going on. Clean this particular project. So this is a common yet hard to find error. So my project wasn't building. I had a little red X here, right? Didn't really tell me much more than that. So I was like, okay, I'll just try to clean it. So I cleaned my project. Now my Java doesn't compile. My Java doesn't compile because it can't find R, right? You may do Control-Shift-O to try to fix that, but that doesn't really do much. So you're like, okay, so what else could be going on? So status not defined. It says status not defined. Okay, I know that's a problem, but there's something earlier than that that is a problem as well. It's in one of the XML files, right? So it's kind of hard to find. Let me see if it's maybe this. Eclipse doesn't really do justice telling you what just happened, right? Okay, so let me see if console gives me some idea. No, it doesn't. Okay, so I don't know what just happened. I did a clean again, but my R is now generated. Okay, but I still have a problem with Java. Why? It says you can't find it. Now, if I look at my R, like I told you, you don't normally look at it, but layout status does exist. So why is this guy saying you can't find it? It's there. Our layout status is there. I fixed some other problem, and ultimately I fixed that problem, but it's there. Our layout status. What's going on? Hmm?
Does it somehow compete with the new theme?
No.
Why?
No, it doesn't. It does compete with something, but not a new theme.
Is there an error?
No, we fixed it. There was an error.
So when you clean, it deletes the resource file.
Yeah, it cleans all the byproducts. It deletes not resource file, but R file.
Yeah, I mean, alpha.
Yeah. Yeah. Hard to find, huh? So here's what happened. And this is one of those, like, you know, you could be like staring at it till 5 p.m. and you're not going to find it. It's actually, the answer is right there on line 3. So what happened was I had a problem, right? And the problem, so remember the build system sort of builds this way, okay? That's how the build system builds. So if you have a problem in XML, right? And usually you have less information about problems in XML because Eclipse doesn't tell you as much, oh, line such and such, such a problem, right? It's much trickier to find XML errors. But if that fails, that prevents R from being generated. So the R is stale. Well, I couldn't figure out my XML problem, so I said clean, right? Which is what you would normally do. So I did project clean. That got rid of R, right? Now I went to this file, and I was still wasn't compiling. I was like, huh. So I did what I normally do is organize imports, right? There's a really useful feature in Eclipse called source override or organize imports, and it figures out, you know, if something is missing, it goes and figures out the references and just plugs it in, right? It actually organizes your import statements, right? And it actually keeps them closed, right? Normally, in this case, I was kind of lucky that this was on the top, but if it was like this, it'd be even harder to find it because you usually just keep this collapsed. You're not too much concerned with it, right? So later on, I somehow figured out what the problem was with the XML. I fixed that. I ultimately got R to generate. So I didn't make my build through here, but I was like, why is this still not compiling, right? What's going on? And that had to do with the R not being our R, but being Android.R. But since we imported it, it became our R. Right? So when I say R dot, I'm actually not looking at my R right here, but I'm looking at some system R, which is referring to those system resources, excuse me, right?
It should not be there.
Hmm?
Should not be there.
Yeah, it shouldn't. If I remove this line, everything's nice and dandy, right? Because
Put that in there, the source
organize imports.
organized imports.
Yeah.
Do that in there.
Yeah, because the organize import said, oh, look, you're looking for R. Well, the only R I find is Android.R, and actually there's no conflict because you don't have anything local that's competing for attention, right? Because that was after I did a clean. So it's a really common and hard to find error. So watch out for Android.R. You almost never should be including it, right? If you want to refer to a system, I would actually explicitly say Android.R as opposed to importing it. So far, so good? So we fix that, make sure it runs, blah, blah. Oh, but this is, again, the problem with the fact that ADB doesn't find my thing. No devices. Obviously it's here, but ADB lost it. So you try to do kill server, and you try to do start server. And hopefully that reboots the connection. There it is. So now if I say run, there's my number. So far so good. Okay, so do you guys get this whole thing of how widgets work, how set properties and widgets work or views? Yeah. Okay, so let's do something. Let's call it done with the this part, right? So let's say we are done with this for now. We can always come back to it. So let's switch over to Java. Ultimately, we said Java does the show, right? That's what processes the button. Okay. So let's take a look at our Java. Our Java is uber simple, right? 11, 12 lines of code, right? So we have an activity that we subclass and call it status activity. We override on create. We call it super, and then we say set content view to our layout status. I talked about this line before. I said this is the line that does a lot of work, right? It does the actual inflating of XML from the resource file into the Java memory space. Okay. So what this line is actually going to do is it's going to look up status. It's going to use R to look up status XML. Not in graphical view, but in actual source code. Then what it's going to do, it's going to go through this file line by line, right? So for every element, right, it's going to create a Java object. So this becomes a new Java object called linear layout. For every attribute, like width, it's going to say set the width to field parent, set the height to field parent, set the color to my blue, set the orientation to vertical, right? Then it's going to say add a new text view object, set ID, set style, set text, right? And so on and so on. So basically that innocent little line of code is actually going through this XML, parsing it, inflating it in Java memory space, and creating all the objects along the way. If you have a style and you want to override one of the fields in a style, yeah, I mean, cascades down. So if your style says background color is blue, but then the actual widget says, okay, I'm going to use that style, but background color is going to be yellow.
Yeah.
It's going to be yellow because it's closer to the widget. So it cascades down.
So we can do that here, right? So style, we define the style, but after that we say color equal.
Yeah, you can override stuff, yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so this process is called inflating from XML, right? So let's take a look. So if I go into status activity, right, what I'm going to do is I want to define my widgets that, so after this line, I actually have all my widgets that I care about in Java memory. I just need to refer to them. The question is, which ones do you actually care about? Let's go graphical. Which of these widgets do you actually programmatically care about?
The button and the text area.
Yeah, so you care about the button, you want to know when the button is pressed, and you care about the text area because you want to know what kind of text is entered, right? That's it, in this case. Okay, so that brings me to one of the, I remember we talked about the commonly used properties. The one that we didn't talk about was the ID, right? So ID is how we're going to identify a particular widget, right? It looks similar to everything else you've seen. There's the only thing that's kind of new is this at plus. That's at plus ID and then some kind of ID. Any ideas what the significance of the plus is? I mean, other than, you know, this guy's over decided to shall be so over pizza and beer somewhere. It's implicitly kind of defining it because this ID is not, unlike string or style or color or anything else, it's not going to exist in some file. The moment you say add plus ID, you're like saying let there be this ID somewhere. But you're not really referring to another resource. Like when I say add string / hello, I'm referring to strings XML, a line item that says, you know, name value pair is hello, right? So, oh, I mean, no, it's actually not an array. It's just going to be a flat list. Yeah, yeah. It's actually going to be implemented in R, so it's going to be just you know, a pointer, essentially, a number assigned somehow. So widgets that you care about programmatically, you should assign them ID. It's the easiest way to refer to them. So what we're going to do is for this guy, the button, you can do it this way. I'm going to right-click on the button, and you can give it an ID. Now, Eclipse almost always already gives you ID. But the ID Eclipse gives you is kind of like, you know, generic button 1 ID, button 47 ID. It doesn't really tell you what it is. So I'll say something like button _ update. Click OK. The other component we kind of care about programmatically is the text. So same thing. I'm going to right-click, say edit ID, and I'll say edit status. Okay. Now, if you open up actually a layout, outline, it actually shows you the properties and their corresponding IDs. So edit status, button update, and text view 1. So this one doesn't have anything. This one has text view 1. This one has button update and edit status. Right.
So that it's easy to reference it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what I also like to do is things that I don't care about programmatically, I actually go and explicitly remove their IDs. I consider that clutter, right? So, like for example, that button text view 1. Well, I'm not going to programmatically be changing the title, right? I mean, you could, but that's not our case in this example, right? So because of that, I would actually remove it. So, I usually do it like from here. It's easier, and I'll just kind of like remove it. Oops, Control S. So text view now does not have that clutter. Now keep in mind that this is not updated for whatever reason, but you know, tools are not perfect. Price is right. If you don't need it, you just delete it. Yes, yeah, yeah. If you wanna put some logic there, yeah, you would need an ID. Okay. So. And by the way, another thing that I wanted to point out about IDs is that they also don't have a namespace. So it's going to be a flat list. So we already have 2 IDs in this tiny little example. This can quickly grow to 20, 200, right? You get the idea. You can have a lot of things all in one big flat list. So you kind of want to, that's another reason why you want to remove clutter. And also you want to think about the naming convention, right? Like I said, you could do what it is _ the name, or you could do name _ where it's at, or you just create whatever works for you, right? So I usually say what it is, like button and then _ update, right? I could have called it status _ button _ update or something like that, right? Different people do different style. But you should be consistent across organization, I guess. So, so far so good on this one, right?
But the IDs are not unique.
The IDs don't have to be unique, but if you have it, if I am on a status activity and I ask for button update, I better have only 1 button update. I actually don't know what's going to happen if you have 2. Maybe Wildpro may just return the first one. Or you know, whichever one. So they don't have to be unique if you are going to have like an update button on every single screen, right? You're going to call it whatever, and then on that screen it's going to refer to that button. So that's fine. Yeah, question? It doesn't tell you, so camel case versus underscore, it doesn't really tell you anything about the parameter. They're not very consistent. I used to use camel case, then I switched to underscore because I saw Googlers do a lot of underscores, so I kind of took it from the source. One thing to worry about is your file names are not allowed to have, I believe, capital letters or numbers, right? just underscores, and neither file names nor properties are supposed to have dashes, right? So for example, if I wanted to call this button dash update, it's gonna blow up. Question is why? Well, let's look at R. So remember, the moment you change something in resources and save the file, right? R gets regenerated. So let's take a look at R right now. We change the button, the underscore update to button dash update. So what did we get on this line? Yeah. So you can obviously in Java, because it's going to become a Java variable, you're not allowed to do things that you can't have in Java variables. So be mindful of that. It also gives you a cryptic error message. It says only, and then followed by a regular expression is allowed, right? So how are you guys doing with your regular expressions, right? So yeah, so be mindful of that. That's why I stick to underscores. Yeah. All right, so let's switch to Java at this point. So our Java is still hello world Java, right? Super simple, nothing that we've done. Now, you guys said we care about button and edit text programmatically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define them. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say button update. I'm going to say edit text, edit status. Just creating some variables for it, right? Now, why is button and edit text underlined red? Yeah, you got to import them. So the quick, easy way in Eclipse always is source over organize imports. Control-Shift-O, right? Bam, bam. It just does it. Or Control-Command-O. I mean, Command-Shift-O. Yeah. On the Mac. Cool. Now, after we loaded everything in Java memory space, we can now look those elements up, right? So what I can do is I can say button update. So for example, like this, button update is a button, but I gotta find it, and to find it I'm gonna go to control space. Control space is your, like, for those of you new to Eclipse, it's your universal sort of, you know, context-sensitive shortcut. So it figures out context you're in, and you can just start typing. Find view by ID. There, bam. It's very helpful, especially because in Eclipse, in Android, a lot of these names are very, very long. So you don't want to type them. Because typing leads to typos. So typing is bad. Yeah, you want to know there's a handful of shortcuts. We did Control F to format. We talked about organize imports. We are now talking about Control Shift O to Control Space to do completion. There may be, and there's probably one or two more. So now it's asking me for the ID of that widget. Well, that's not a problem. We have R for that. So R dot. And then you go down to ID, dot, and then you find your button update. Right? So I'm a big proponent of actually using the Eclipse hand coding to kind of like complete stuff for you, because that it's kind of like checks and balances that you don't do typos, like some, you know, stuff you typed and it's like, yeah, referring to what. Okay, so that's the button. We found it. You guys do the edit status. Edit status. Same thing. Yeah, you always get a cast because what you get back is a view. just a generic view. The view is sort of like the smallest component that you can put on the screen. Right? So yes, so in this case it would be edit status is an edit text, right? Find view by ID r dot ID dot, and notice that I did not type here. I kind of sit here and wait for Eclipse to offer me choices. Okay, there's edit status. Now I'm certain that actually that I do have that ID that was all saved and recompiled and blah blah blah, right? You want that. So far so good. So we now found a reference to those two elements. Now what? How would you handle button clicks in standard Java? Listeners, yeah, or handlers, yeah. Listeners. So it works very similarly in Android. So for example, so after I found my button update, what I could do is I could say button update dot set, and then one of the listeners, and then in this case it would be the on-click listener. Okay. So I'm now saying when the button update is clicked, it needs to notify one of its listeners. That's the design pattern that they use for implementing the events. So what would be a good listener? It needs to be something that adheres to on-click listener interface. How would you guys do it? Java guys, how would you do it?
Define an listener, an anonymous class.
Yeah, you could do an anonymous class right here, but that would probably confuse the rest of you who are not Java developers, right? How many of you don't know what an anonymous unit class is? Okay, so we're not going to do that because of that. It's very common, and it's one of those things that half people think it's the greatest thing ever, the other half think it's the most horrible thing ever invented, right? So it's, pick your camp, right? So out of all evils, one of the easiest evils would be to make this be the listener. So basically I'm saying this, for those of you new to Java, refers to status activity instance, right? It refers to this object itself. So I'm saying let notify this guy that that's the case, right? That the button got clicked. Okay. Now Eclipse complains and says, hold on 1 second. Like whoever you're going to notify needs to be notifiable. Needs to be somebody that implements on-click listener, right? So no big deal. You go and you put a mouse over it, right? Like that, and then you can scroll to the bottom of that list. Put the mouse gently, right? You go to the bottom of that list and you say, let status activity implement the on-click listener. You're looking for the item on the very, very bottom, right? So in other words, what we're doing, watch line 8. What we're doing is we're inserting the statement that we now are a on-click listener. So status activity now says I too can receive notifications when a click happens, right? Okay. So now Eclipse still complains. It says, fine, you claim so, but not really. You're really not adhering to the on-click listener interface, right? So you put your mouse over the next error, right? Okay. And when you see an option, add unimplemented methods, it's usually the first option. It's almost always the option that you want. You're missing some kind of callback method. So the nature of Android is that that's how we do it. It's almost always you want to add unimplemented methods. So you could say add an unimplemented method. Bam. Okay. So we now have a placeholder, a to do something with that button click. Right? Everything compiles, everything's happy. But you guys notice that little dance with the Eclipse, right? Eclipse can call them. Right? So you make one error, you let Eclipse fix it, then you create a second error, then you let Eclipse fix it, and by the time you do all that, you got your placeholder to do some code. So you're gonna see a lot of code actually ends up being auto-generated, like something else just writes code for you. Cool. So now that we have a placeholder that the button is gonna call us back, this is gonna be the view V. This is gonna be the button that calls back, right? We can do something here. Right? We could say, all right, thanks for notifying us. What do we do next? We could, but in the spirit of keeping this calling complete and growing it organically, let's do the simplest thing possible, and that would be to type something to a log. Right? This is an opportunity to also kind of show you how logs work, right? Okay. So Android has a pretty cool logging capability. You can log from anywhere in the code. As a matter of fact, it's the same log system works for C and Java. So the entire platform goes to this log file. It's actually a circular log file, so you don't worry about it ever growing too large, right? So the access to that is via a static method called log dot, and then you pick a severity. So like for example, D would be debug. You say something like this, log.d, and then tag, comma, message, right? So tag could be anything. It could be name of your class or name of your app, whatever you want to use for tagging, like for example, status activity, right? And message could be, on clicked. So I know that we got clicked. It actually imported log. Nice. If log is underlined red, you would type in Control-Shift-O or Command-Shift-O, and that would import your log.
From the two logs, Apache or Android.
Yeah, good point. So I don't know why it didn't show me that. Normally I get the same error. But let me remove my import. So it doesn't know about my log. Control-Shift-O. There we go. So guess what? Log is a common name. Right? That's what you get for having something named 3 letters, right? So obviously there's an ambiguity. So it's like, okay, I want to import log, but which one? Right? So this is where you guys kind of got to use your common sense. Is it going to be an Android log or is it going to be Apache log? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so that takes care of that. And that is noon in San Francisco on Wednesday. The drill. So don't go running. Yeah. I thought it was on Wednesdays, but they must have changed it.
So what was the dot D?
So what is the .d? .d, yeah, the log can print into separate, you can filter it based on severity as well. So you have, for example, .i is info, .e is error, .w is warning. There's actually even this one, .wtf. I'm not making this up. And it doesn't stand for what you think it stands for. It stands for what a terrible failure. It's basically the same thing, right? So it's basically an error that should not have happened, right? So, yeah. Yeah, these guys are funny. Okay, so far so good. So you can fire it up, right? Click on run, bam. The question is now, if I click on update, 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 where does the log go? Well, obviously log goes into a logcat. Well, maybe not so obvious, but there's something called the logcat. So you can click on log, 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 update, update, update a couple of times, just so you have some, noise. But log goes to logcat. Okay. So what is a logcat? Let me show you. Logcat is your friend. A logcat is basically this thing that you can open. You can open it from this perspective. It's pretty common. You can open it from this perspective. You can actually, usually people use it under DDMS, and you would open it up. There's a logcat. For some reason, standard Eclipse puts it at the bottom, which doesn't make a lot of sense because it doesn't give you a lot of space. I usually, if I use it here, I move it up here, so I get more space for it. Right? But this is my logcat. It shows me what's going on with my device.
I don't want the tab logcat. So if I go to DDMS, then
it's usually at the bottom. Now, it may be that you don't have logcat at all. Like you just blew up a window, bam, gone. Right? Whenever you're missing a window, show view, and then either find it here or go under other. Right? Bam. So we're back. Okay. Now, you guys got logcat, everyone? Okay. So you want to get really familiar with logcat because it's super useful. Logcat is basically system level logging capability, and it can be a very noisy place, right? You could have a lot of stuff going on at the same time. So a useful thing to do is to filter it. So for example, you could filter it based on severity, right? I only care about errors, for instance. Or you may say, I'll keep everything, but I want to create a filter. Like this, right? So you specify a filter name. It could be something like, I don't know, interesting, right? And then you can filter based on tag, message, PID, application name, etc., right? So I could say I'm going to filter based on, I don't know if this works, Yamba. I don't think it does. Yeah, it doesn't. So I'm going to edit it, but it does work if you filter based on tag. So tag, status, activity. Yes. Yeah. So there it is for me. So if I go here and I go next, 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 you can see how click, 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 you can see that it's actually logging. So far, so good? You can give it any tag you want. So yes, you can have multiple. You can have any tag you want, and then you can filter based on that. The tag is just an arbitrary name. You can tag it Bobby, right? So this is how you use logcat in Eclipse. Like I said, for everything that there's a button in Eclipse, there's also a command line tool, right? So remember our ADB, right? ADB, one of the things that ADB also offers is access to logcat. There's my ADB logcat. Right, so I just do a click, 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 and you can see that it's working. Make sense? Yeah. So I just went to my command line, and I said ADB logcat. If you do run it on command line, what you should know is that you can also filter. And documentation says you say the tag you want to filter for, column severity. So for example, if I wanted to filter for everything from status activity, I would say ADB logcat status activity column star. So it's going to give me everything from status activity. Make sense? Except that's actually going to give you everything together, like other tags as well. What's not documented very well is that you also have to tell it what you don't want to know. It's kind of silly. But you got to say everything else, silence. For whatever reason, that's how it works. Right, so now I have my signal to noise ratio just right. So if I go to the emulator, click on update, 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 there it is. Got it? Questions, comments on this? Okay. So now that we have that, let's do one better on this. Now we want to get the text that was typed in a text box and actually print it out. Woohoo. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my on click. I'm going to get my edit status. Right? So I'll say edit status. And I'm going to ask edit status for its text. Get text. Right? String status text is going to be that's the string. So far so good on that? Okay, so now we can print it out. I can say onClicked with text plus text, run this and see what happens. Ooh, I'll find an exception this way. Okay, I'm gonna open up my console. I'm gonna say hello. Click on update, and there it is on click to the text hello. That seems to have worked. Okay, so let's do this. I wanna show you a simpler way to do this, the same thing. I like to do it complex first and then do a simpler second, right? So let's go back to status, right? Remember in status I had to give my button an ID, then I had to go to my status activity, and I had to define that button, right? And then I had to find it, and then I had to set the listener, then I had to do this, then I had to do that. Make sense? So the steps were that we basically define ID. That was kind of like one, right? Then we would define the button here. We would fetch it, find it, right? Then we would assign the listener. Then for this to work, we had to basically say this. Then we had to basically provide the implementation here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, right? Got it? So let's make this simpler. So here's another way to do this. You can actually get rid of the ID of the button altogether. Right? And instead, you're going to say control space Android column on click. There's a property called on click. Inside of this property, you specify the name of the method to call, like Bobby or Tommy or onClick, right? So we already have onClick, so I'm just going to use the same name. Just the name of the method, the callback method to call. So far so good? Now, on the other side, in Java, you just have to have that method that accepts a view, which we already have. That's that method there, right? I'm not going to change anything there, right? So you can now get rid of anything to do with the button. Get rid of this declaration. You can get rid of button update. So that's 2 lines down, 3 lines down, right? And then you can get rid of this. Quite a bit of cutting, chopping, right? Okay. And by the way, this override here was not correct to begin with, right? Because we weren't overriding, we were implementing. This is Java 6 wrongness, right? Cool. So we made this line much, this code much smaller. Yeah.
What's happening? How's the plumbing happening?
So how does this work? It's using basically reflection. So it's basically looking up. It says, okay, I'm inflating inside of this class. What does this class have? Does it have something that matches that name? This button cannot be casted. What is it talking about? I'm not casting anything. Let me do project clean. I'm not sure why I'm complaining. There it is. Clean, save the day. I say hello again. Click on update, and that is right there. So everything worked the same, but we dramatically made our code simpler. Right? The question now is, well, why didn't I show you this right away? I mean, you may just like, I don't like you guys or something, so I'm like showing you the hard way as opposed to the easy way. The easy way, the problem with the easy way is that it only works for the button. Right? The hard way works for all the other listeners. Like you may be watching things like text change listener, like if you want to keep the count of how many letters have been typed in, and so on, right? Make sense? So this is just a shortcut that works just for buttons. The other approach is more universal. What's for anything? Yeah.
If it only works for a button, then it's not very useful.
If it only works for a button, it's not very useful. Well, it's useful for buttons. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you just want to use it for buttons, just lets you knock it out faster. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could have an app that just has buttons. Like our app just has a button right now. So, yeah. So.
I don't like that it does some document in the Java that it implements.
Yeah. So you have no idea, if you're reading the Java code, you have no idea what this on-click is. You have no idea what this view is, why it's there, and so forth. That's just how the documentation is defined. So that's a convention that it needs to be adhered to. So yeah, so that's that in terms of the that. Any other questions or comments on this one? Yeah.
Can you please explain the bundle again? Like who's passing the bundle and how is it initialized?
The button?
The bundle.
Oh, the bundle. What's going on with the bundle? Let's take a look. Now that you guys know about log, right? I can say something like this: log dot. And by the way, you don't need to do this. This is just experimental code. What I usually do, however, I usually define static final string tag here, just so I have a easy way to tag. That's just something that I do in all my code for whatever reason, right? Because I like log a lot, so I use that quite a bit. So I may say log d tag comma, right? So as opposed to typing this long thing, I just type something like this, right? So if I do, I can say tag, and I can say on clicked with bundle, and then I'll print out the bundle, right? The problem is if the bundle is, well, I guess I can just say bundle, sorry, not bundle, but saved instance state dot describe content, and it puts the nature is parseable, that's bytes, size to string. Return some data. Let me call this bundle, make it shorter. Again, you don't have to do this. This is just to illustrate. So I could do a bundle, for example. I could just print it out. Okay. So if I run this, alright, so first time around, we got nothing. Bundle is null. I just started my app. Right? What happens if I, like, for example, go to home screen, and now I long press this to see the running apps, I go back to my Yamba. Okay, so on click didn't even happen, right? Not, sorry, it wasn't on click, on create, right? It's misleading. Okay. So it didn't even happen. But if I do this, Control F11, see, this time around, bundle actually has data in it. Right? So that's when it's being used. That's what we talked about yesterday. Sometimes this doesn't return back properly. I guess it does not. So, right? So it changes the state, saves some information, whatever that information is, some primitive information. So that's one. Any other questions on that? Yeah. You can actually change that. Like I mentioned that, like in a manifest file, I could say that I believe it's part of the application. I could be wrong. Oops. No, it's not part of the application. It's part of the manifest, maybe. No. Part of the activity. It's part of the activity, which makes sense. Screen orientation, specify the orientation. You can say config changes. So basically, you can specify one or more configuration changes that the activity will handle itself. So if you don't want system to do it for you, you specify this property. Then in here, you can say orientation. Okay. So basically, what I'm saying now is, you know what? Thanks for doing this automatic stuff, but I got it, right? So if I run this, I may have to implement on configuration change listener, but let's see. So it's created with the empty bundle, right? So Control Shift F11. All right. Control Shift F11. So it did rotate the screen, but it didn't destroy my bundle, right? It didn't go through that whole life cycle. So you can kind of handle it yourself if you want. We can change that.